The spring storm hit the Circle Bar Ranch like the wrath of God himself, sending sheets of rain across the Montana plains and turning the usually dusty yard into a muddy mess that would bog down a man clear to his knees. Clara Mae Thompson stood at the kitchen window of the ranch house, watching lightning split the purple-black sky, while she kneaded tomorrow's bread with the steady rhythm of someone who'd been doing such work since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. At 24, Clara had been cooking for the Circle Bar for nigh on 8 years, ever since old Jake Brennan took pity on a 16-year-old orphan girl with nowhere to go and a fierce determination to make her own way in the world. She'd worked her way up from washing dishes and peeling potatoes to becoming the best cook in 100 miles of Helena, Montana territory. Cowboys would ride from neighboring ranches just to taste her famous sourdough biscuits and beef stew, and Jake paid her $40 a month, more than most women could dream of earning. Miss Clara. Young Tommy Burke burst through the kitchen door, water streaming from his hat and coat. There's a fella out there in the storm, horse gone lame, and he looks about ready to keel over. Clara wiped her floury hands on her apron and grabbed the oil lamp from the table. Through the sheeting rain, she could make out the silhouette of a man supporting a limping horse near the barn. Even in the dim light, she could tell he wasn't dressed like any cowboy she'd ever seen. His coat looked store-bought and expensive, and he sat his horse like a man more used to carriages and cattle drives. "Tommy, go fetch Mr. Brennan," she called over the thunder, "and get Doc Martinez to look at that horse. I'll see to the man." Clara threw her woolen shawl over her head and splashed across the muddy yard to where the stranger stood in the barn doorway, still holding his horse's reins. Up close, she could see he was a man of perhaps 30 years, tall and lean, with dark hair plastered his head by the rain and gray eyes that looked grateful but embarrassed. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his sodden hat, "I'm mighty sorry to impose, but my horse picked up a stone and went lame about 2 miles back. I was hoping I might shelter here until this storm passes." His voice surprised her, cultured and educated, with the kind of Eastern accent she'd heard from traveling salesmen and circuit preachers. Not the rough drawl of ranch hands or the clipped efficiency of Army officers, but something softer, more refined. "Course you can shelter here," Clara said, leading him toward the house. "Ain't Christian to turn a man out in weather like this. I'm Clara Mae Thompson, cook for the Circle Bar." "William Carter," the stranger replied, following her up the porch steps. "I'm much obliged for your kindness, Miss Thompson." Inside the warm kitchen, Clara got her first good look at their unexpected guest. William Carter was indeed handsome, with strong features softened by eyes that seemed to take in everything with genuine interest rather than judgment. His clothes, while soaked, were clearly expensive, wool coat with brass buttons, fine leather boots, and a pocket watch chain that caught the lamplight. "You look half froze," Clara observed, bustling about the kitchen. "Sit yourself down by the stove while I get you some coffee and something hot to eat." "You're very kind," William said, settling gratefully into the chair she indicated. "I fear I'm not very well prepared for Western weather. I'm a writer, you see, traveling from back east to collect stories about life out here." Clara poured coffee into her best china cup, not the tin ones the cowboys used, and set before him along with a plate of cold beef and fresh bread. "A writer? What kind of stories are you looking for?" "Oh, tales of frontier life, encounters with Indians, cattle drives, mining camps, the sort of adventures that folks back in Boston and New York find so fascinating." William wrapped his hands around the warm cup and smiled. "Though I'm beginning to think the reality is quite different from the dime novels." "Reckon it is," Clara agreed, settling into the chair across from him. "Most days out here ain't nearly as exciting as them books make out. Mostly it's just hard work, try and make an honest living and keep body and soul together." William studied her face in the lamplight. "And how does a young lady come to be cooking for a ranch in Montana territory? If you don't mind my asking?" "Ain't much of a tale," Clara said, though something in his tone suggested genuine interest rather than idle curiosity. "Ma and Pa died of fever when I was 16. Mr. Brennan, he owns this place, gave me work and a place to stay. Been here ever since, saving my money buy my own land someday." "Your own land?" William leaned forward with obvious interest. "That's quite an ambitious goal." "Ain't so ambitious if you work hard enough for it," Clara replied with quiet dignity. I figure another 2, 3 years, I'll have enough saved for a small spread. Nothing fancy, just enough to run a few head of cattle, and maybe take in travelers like yourself. Before William could respond, Jake Brennan stomped into the kitchen, his gray beard dripping rainwater and his weathered face creased with concern. Clara May, Tommy said we got company, he said, then nodded to William. Name's Jake Brennan. This here's my ranch. William rose and extended his hand. William Carter, sir, I'm very grateful for your hospitality. Jake shook the offered hand, his callous palm rough against William's softer one. Writer, what brings you way out here to God's country? Research, mostly. I'm hoping to write about the real West, not the romanticized version that's popular in Eastern publications. Well, you come to the right place for real, Jake said with a chuckle. Ain't nothing romantic about mucking out stalls or branding cattle. Clara May, you fix this fella up with a place to sleep? The bunkhouse is full up, Clara said thoughtfully, but there's a clean room above the stable. I can get it ready quick enough. Much obliged, William said. I don't mind paying for my keep. Perhaps I could help with ranch work in exchange for room and board. I'm willing to learn. Jake and Clara exchanged a glance. Most Easterners who found their way out here expected to be treated like paying guests, not offering to work for their supper. Can you handle a pitchfork? Jake asked. I'm willing to try, sir. Fair enough. Clara May, get this boy settled. Tomorrow we'll see what he's made of. As the storm continued to rage outside, Clara found herself stealing glances at their unexpected guest. There was something about William Carter that didn't quite add up, his expensive clothes, his educated speech, the way he held himself like a man accustomed to comfort. But there was also something genuine in his manner, a warmth and respect in how he spoke to her that she wasn't used to receiving from men, especially men of obvious breeding and means. When she led him to the room above the stable, clean and spare but comfortable, he turned to her in the doorway. Miss Thompson, Clara May, I want you to know how grateful I am, not just for the shelter, but for treating me like a regular person instead of some curiosity from back east. Out here, a man's judged by what he does, not where he comes from, Clara replied. You seem decent enough, Mr. Carter. That's good enough for me. As she made her way back to the ranch house through the dying storm, Clara found herself thinking about the mysterious William Carter. Something told her that his arrival at the Circle Bar was going to change things in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She had no idea just how right she was. Chapter 2, Learning and Longing. The next 6 weeks passed like a dream Clara may never wanted to wake from. William Carter proved to be exactly what he promised, willing to learn and eager to help, even if his early attempts at ranch work provided considerable entertainment for the cowboys. His first morning, Clara watched from the kitchen window as he tried to muck out stalls, clearly having never held a pitchfork in his life. By noon, he was covered in hay and horse manure, but he kept at it with a determination that earned grudging respect from even the most skeptical hands. City boys got sand. I'll give him that, said Rusty McLean, the ranch foreman, as he watched William struggle to learn the proper way to curry a horse. Most Eastern dudes would have hightailed it back to town after the first day. Clara found herself looking forward to William's appearances in her kitchen, for coffee in the early morning before the ranch woke up, for the hearty meals she prepared for the hands, and especially for the quiet conversations they shared in the evenings when the day's work was done. You know, William said one evening as he helped her wash dishes, something that had scandalized the cowboys initially, I've learned more about real life in these past weeks than in all my years back east. What kind of life did you have back there? Clara asked, genuinely curious. She'd been wondering about his background, though she was too polite to pry. William was quiet for a moment, carefully drying a plate. A comfortable one, I suppose. Too comfortable, maybe. Everything arranged for me. Every decision made by others. I never had to wonder where my next meal was coming from or whether I'd have a roof over my head. Sounds nice to some folks, I reckon. It was suffocating, William admitted, like being wrapped in cotton wool. No challenge, no real purpose. Just expectations. Clara studied his profile in the lamplight. What kind of expectations? William set down the plate. and turned to face her. The kind that don't leave much room for a man to choose his own path. "Clara May, there's something I should tell you." But before he could continue, Tommy Burke burst through the kitchen door with news of a mountain lion threatening the cattle, and the moment was lost. As the days passed, Clara noticed changes in William. His hands grew callous from hard work, his shoulders broadened, and his pale eastern complexion darkened to a healthy bronze. More importantly, he seemed to come alive in ways that suggested he'd never truly been living before. He proved surprisingly adept at learning ranch skills once he got the hang of it. Jake Brennan, initially skeptical, began to rely on him for increasingly important tasks. "That Carter fellow's got a good head on his shoulders," Jake told Clara one evening. "Shane will be moving on soon. Could use a man like that permanent-like." The thought of William leaving made Clara's chest tighten in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. She'd grown accustomed to his presence, to the way he treated her like an equal, to the intelligence and kindness in his gray eyes. It was during the spring roundup that everything changed between them. Clara had ridden out with the chuck wagon to feed the hands during the 3-day cattle drive, and William had volunteered to help her manage the camp. On the second night, as they sat by the dying campfire after the cowboys had turned in, William finally found the courage to speak what had been growing in his heart. "Clara May," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She looked up from mending a torn dish towel, firelight dancing across her face. "What's that?" I've come to care for you. More than I should. Maybe more than is wise." Clara's hands stilled on the fabric. "Well, I know it's foolish," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we come from different worlds, and I know I got no right to speak of such things when I'll likely be moving on soon. But I couldn't let another day pass without telling you how I feel." Clara set down her mending and looked at him directly. "How do you feel?" William moved closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Like I've been sleeping my whole life until I met you. Like everything I thought mattered before was just empty. Clara May, you're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever known. When I'm with you, I feel like the man I was meant to be." For a long moment, they sat in silence with only the crackling fire and distant lowing of cattle between them. Then Clara reached out and touched his hand. "I care for you too, Will. More than I should, considering you'll be heading back east soon enough. What if I didn't?" The words came out in a rush. "What if I stayed? Not just here at the ranch, but in Montana territory? What if I helped you buy that land you're saving for?" Clara's breath caught. "You don't know what you're saying. This ain't your world. You got a life back east, responsibilities." "I had obligations," William corrected, taking her hand in both of his. "There's a difference. Clara May, I've never felt as alive as I do here, working beside you, being part of something real and honest. Back east, I was just existing." He leaned closer, and Clara didn't pull away. When he kissed her, gentle and reverent under the Montana stars, she felt like her whole world had suddenly rearranged itself around this moment. "What are we doing, Will?" she whispered against his lips. "Something that feels right," he murmured back. "Maybe the first truly right thing I've ever done." They sat together until dawn, talking about dreams and possibilities, about the life they might build together in this wild, beautiful country. William spoke of buying land, raising cattle, building a home where Clara could be his partner in all things, not just some ornament to be admired from a distance. As the sun rose over the endless grassland, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara May Thompson allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found the one thing she'd never dared to hope for, a love that saw her as she truly was and valued her for it. She had no way of knowing that William Carter was keeping a secret that would shatter both their dreams, or that representatives of his real life were already on their way to find him. For now, there was just this perfect moment, this impossible love, and the promise of a future that seemed as bright and boundless as the Montana sky. The riders appeared on the horizon just as Clara May was hanging laundry on the line behind the ranch house. 3 men in fine eastern suits, mounted on horses that had clearly been purchased rather than born to the saddle, picking their way carefully across the prairie like they expected to encounter hostile Indians behind every sagebrush. Something cold settled in Clara's stomach as she watched them approach. Strangers didn't often come to the Circle Bar Ranch dressed like bankers, and she had a sinking feeling their arrival had something to do with William. He'd been different these past few days. Quieter, more thoughtful, often staring off toward the eastern horizon with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she'd asked if something was troubling him, he'd pulled her close and said only that he needed to tell her something important, but the right moment never seemed to come. "Clara May," Jake Brennan's voice called from the front of the house. "We got visitors asking after our writer friend." Her hand stilled on the shirt she was pinning to the line. Through the open kitchen window, she could hear unfamiliar voices, cultured Eastern accents that made William seem almost Western by comparison. Seeking William Pemberton, though he may be using another name. Family is quite concerned about his prolonged absence. Certain he came west on the Northern Pacific Railway. Pemberton, not Carter. Clara's heart began to pound as the implications hit her like a physical blow. William had lied about his name, which meant he'd likely lied about everything else. She forced herself to walk calmly to the kitchen, where she found Jake speaking with 3 well-dressed men, while William stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale as winter snow. "There you are," said the eldest of the visitors, a distinguished man with silver whiskers and eyes like chips of blue ice. "William, your grandmother is beside herself with worry." "Uncle Charles," William said quietly, his voice strangely formal. "I didn't expect us to find you." The man's tone was sharp with disapproval. "My boy, you disappear from Boston without a word, abandon your responsibilities, and leave poor Miss Ashworth in a most awkward position. Your family has been frantic." Clara felt the room spin slightly. Miss Ashworth? William had never mentioned any Miss Ashworth. Who might this Miss Ashworth be? Jake asked, clearly sensing the tension in the room. "William's fiancée, of course," Uncle Charles replied, as if this should be obvious. The engagement was announced in all the Boston papers before William's unfortunate departure. The coffee cup Clara had been holding slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. William spun toward her, his gray eyes wide with something that might have been panic. "Clara May, I can explain." "Can you?" Her voice came out steady, though her world was crumbling. "Can you explain why you lied about your name? About who you are? About having a fiancée back east?" Uncle Charles looked between them with dawning understanding, his expression growing even more disapproving. "I see. William, surely you haven't been fraternizing with the help?" The words hit Clara like a slap. She drew herself up to her full height, dignity blazing in her dark eyes. "The help? I'm the cook for this ranch, sir, and I earn my keep with honest work. That's more than I can say for some folks." "Clara May, please." William stepped toward her, but she backed away. "Don't. Just don't." She turned to Uncle Charles. "What's his real name?" "William Pemberton III. The man replied stiffly. "Heir to Pemberton Mills, one of Boston's most respected industrial concerns. Worth approximately $12 million. $12 million. Clara had been saving toward $3,000 to buy her own small spread, and this man, this liar, was worth $12 million. The gulf between them was so vast it made her feel dizzy. And this Miss Ashworth? Clara forced herself to ask. Margaret Ashworth, daughter of Senator Ashworth. A most suitable match, arranged by both families. The wedding is planned for October. William found his voice at last. "I never agreed to that wedding. I left Boston precisely because I couldn't go through with it. Because you're having some sort of crisis of conscience about duty?" Uncle Charles demanded. "Because you develop romantic notions about this frontier life? William, you have responsibilities, obligations to your family and your social position." "What I have," William said, his voice growing stronger, "is the right to choose my own life, and I choose to stay here." "With her?" Uncle Charles's gaze swept over Clara with barely concealed disdain. "A cook? A woman with no breeding, no education, no social standing? William, be reasonable. Get out." Clara's voice was quiet but deadly. "All of you, get out of my kitchen." "Clara May." William started. No, you lied to me about your name, your family, your circumstances, your engagement. Did anything you told me have even a grain of truth to it? William's face was anguished. My feelings for you are true. Everything I said about caring for you, about wanting to build a life here, built on lies. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling cold despite the warm kitchen. You're engaged to another woman. You're worth $12 million. And you let me believe, you let me think. I let myself believe it too, William said desperately. Clara May, what I feel for you is real. The man I am when I'm with you, that's real too. Uncle Charles cleared his throat impatiently. This is all very touching, but William, you must see reason. You cannot simply abandon your obligations for some frontier dalliance. Miss Ashworth is a lovely girl from an excellent family. You will want for nothing as her husband. Except happiness, William said bitterly. Happiness. Uncle Charles laughed harshly. My boy, happiness is a luxury that men of our class cannot afford. We have duties, responsibilities to our families and our society. Love is for poets and shopkeepers. Clara looked at William, really looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. The expensive clothes he tried to downplay, the soft hands that had hardened with work, the cultured speech that occasionally slipped into something more refined. It all made sense now. You were slumming, she said quietly, playing at being a common man, having an adventure you could write about when you got back to your real life. No. William stepped toward her again. Clara May, that's not. It is exactly what it is. Clara's voice was steady now, though her heart was breaking. You would try on a different life like a new coat, seeing how it fit. And I was part of the costume. She turned to Uncle Charles. You can take him back now. He doesn't belong here. Clara May, please, just listen to me. But Clara May Thompson had heard enough lies for one lifetime. She walked out of the kitchen, across the yard, and into the barn, where she could cry in private for the future that had never been real in the first place. Behind her, she could hear Uncle Charles speaking in crisp, businesslike tones about train schedules and family obligations and the necessity of returning to Boston immediately. She didn't hear William's response. She didn't want to. The man she'd fallen in love with, Will Carter, the would-be writer who mucked stalls and helped with dishes, and looked at her like she was the most remarkable woman in the world, had never really existed at all. 3 days had passed since the men from Boston took William away, and Clara May Thompson was discovering that a broken heart didn't stop the world from turning. Cows still needed milking, meals still needed cooking, and life on the Circle Bar Ranch continued with the same relentless rhythm it had always followed. She threw herself into work with a fierce determination, kneading bread with enough force to pulverize granite and scrubbing pots until they gleamed. The cowboys, sensing her mood, gave her a wide berth and complimented every meal with unusual enthusiasm. Miss Clara's taking this hard. She overheard Rusty telling Jake by the barn. That Easton fellow really got under her skin. Can't say I blame her, Jake replied. Seemed like a decent sort for all his fancy breeding. Worked harder than most men I've hired who were born to it. Clara tried not to think about William, about the way he looked at her those last few weeks, about the plans they made sitting by the campfire under the stars, about the kiss that had made her believe in possibilities she'd never dared imagine. But every corner of the ranch held memories now, and she found herself wondering if the pain would ever lessen. On the morning of the 4th day, as she was setting sourdough starter for the week's bread, she heard the sound of hoofbeats in the yard. Through the kitchen window, she glimpsed a lone rider on a familiar bay horse, and her heart nearly stopped. William Pemberton dismounted outside the barn, looking travel-worn and determined. He'd changed from his Eastern clothes back into the simple work shirt and jeans he'd worn during his time at the ranch. But something was different about him, a new resolve in his posture, a firmness in his stride that hadn't been there before. Clara forced herself to continue working, but her hands trembled as she measured flour. She heard Jake's voice from the yard, surprised and somewhat pleased, then the sound of men talking in low, urgent tones. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, she heard footsteps on the kitchen porch. Clara May? William's voice came from the doorway. May I come in? She didn't turn around. Doors not locked. He entered quietly, removing his hat and standing just inside the doorway as if uncertain of his welcome. I came back. I can see that. Clara continued measuring ingredients with meticulous care. Your family know where you are? They know I'm not coming back to Boston. They know I broke an engagement with Margaret Ashworth, though that was more of a relief to her than they expected. Apparently, she's been in love with her riding instructor for 2 years. Clara's hand stilled. And I've been disinherited. Cut off completely. Uncle Charles made it very clear that if I chose to pursue this frontier madness, as he called it, I would do so without a penny of Pemberton money. Now Clara did turn around, studying his face. You gave up $12 million? I gave up a fortune I never earned for a life I never wanted, William corrected. Clara May, I came back because this is where I belong, not because of the money or the adventure or any romantic notion about the West. Because of you. Because of me? Clara's voice was sharp with old hurt. The cook? The hired help with no breeding or education. William flinched at her words. Because of the woman who saw something in me worth saving. The woman who taught me what it means to work for something, to build something with your own hands. The woman I love. Don't. Clara turned back to her bread making, but her movements were jerky now. Don't say that word. You don't get to say that word to me. Why not, if it's true? Because you lied to me. The words burst out of her with all the pain and anger she'd been holding inside. About your name, your family, your whole life. How do I know anything you say is true? William was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because I have nothing left to lie about. I'm not William Pemberton III anymore. That man is dead to his family and his former life. I'm just Will, a man who knows how to muck stalls and help with Roundup, and who wants to spend the rest of his life proving he's worthy of Clara May Thompson's love. Clara's hands clenched in the flour. You think it's that simple? You think you can just come back here and everything will be like it was? No, William said quietly. I think I have to earn your trust back. I think I have to prove that the man who fell in love with you under the Montana stars is real, even if the name I gave you wasn't. He stepped closer, and Clara could feel his presence like warmth from a fire. Clara May, I know I hurt you. I know I broke something precious between us. But I also know that what we had, what we felt, that was real. That was the most real thing I've ever experienced in my life. Clara finally turned to face him fully, and William saw tears glistening in her dark eyes. How do I know you won't change your mind? How do I know that when the novelty wears off, when the work gets hard and the winters get long, you won't decide this life isn't what you thought it would be? Because I already know what the alternative is, William replied. I spent 3 days in Boston, remembering why I left in the first place. Empty conversations about nothing, meaningless social obligations, a life where everything is decided for you and nothing you do matters. Clara May, I'd rather spend 1 day working beside you than a lifetime of luxury without you. And if I can't trust you again, if I can't get past the lies? William's smile was sad but hopeful. Then I'll wait. I'll work here as long as Jake will have me, and I'll prove every day that the man who loves you is real, even if you can never love him back. Clara studied his face, seeing sincerity there, the quiet determination, the absence of the desperate panic that had marked his last day at the ranch. This William, seemed somehow more solid, more present than the man who'd left with his uncle 3 days ago. Jake says you talked to him about buying the Henderson place, she said quietly. William nodded. 500 acres, good water, decent grazing. The house needs work, but it's sound. I've got enough money saved for my time back east to make a down payment and buy some starter cattle. You'd be my neighbor if you'll have me as one. Clara May, I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm not asking you to trust me again immediately. I'm just asking for the chance to prove that the love I feel for you is stronger than any lie I ever told. Clara was quiet for a long time, looking at this man who'd given up everything for the chance to build something real with her. Finally, she said, the Henderson place needs a lot of work. Yes, it does. And you still don't know much about ranching. No, but I'm learning. And if I decide to help you with that place, Just as a neighbor, mind you, I'd expect an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. William's face lit up with the first real smile she'd seen from him since his return. Yes, ma'am. You get nothing but honesty from me from now on, I promise. Clara Mae Thompson looked at William Pemberton. Well, Carter, the man who'd chosen love over fortune, truth over comfort, and her over everything his old life could offer. She thought about the dreams they'd shared under the stars, about the way he'd looked at her like she was the most remarkable woman in the world, about the life they might still build together if she was brave enough to trust again. Well then, she said finally, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, I reckon we best get started. That Henderson place won't fix itself. And as we'll cross the kitchen to take her flour-dusted hands in his work-roughened ones, Clara May allowed herself to believe that sometimes love really could conquer the distance between two different worlds, if both people were willing to meet somewhere in the middle and build something new together. Outside, the Montana wind swept across the endless grassland, carried with it the promise of spring roundups and summer storms, of hard work and quiet evenings, of a love that had been tested by lies and redeemed by truth. It was the beginning of the kind of love story the West was made for, not perfect or easy, but real and lasting and built to weather any storm.